Sean, I want to ask you, the North Carolina bench, when we did this episode last week, had been starting to provide some really positive things, not just statistically, but cohesion, a little more steadiness when they were asked and called upon during the games. Have not done as much this, at least against NC State, and weren't great against Boston College. I know Puff Johnson was out against NC State as he's dealing with some knee issues. Sean, is that something to be concerned about, or do you think it's probably just the fact that, you know, Huff is hurt and it kind of throws things off a little bit?
It's a great question. We've talked so much about developing a bench and finding roles, but at the end of the day, when it gets, into whether it's next week or March, Hubert Davis is not going to look to make a lot of substitutions unless he's forced to in the second half. But at the same time, you never know. Armando's been banged up. There have been injuries, so you need to, the bench needs to be ready to go when they are. And I think it's such the margin of, there's such a small margin. Dontrez Styles goes in pretty early yesterday, and if that first layup goes down for him, maybe that's a little bit of a different story in terms of him getting some minutes. Seth Trimble can be great defensively. I think we thought the Wake Forest game was going to be his turning point offensively, but we still haven't seen really what he's capable of. DeMarco Dunn was really the one player that did get playing time, and I think we've seen that improvement, but it's really going to come down to the bench playing well in the spot minutes, providing a lift. I think Puff needs to be healthy. He's the one guy on the bench I feel most comfortable with in terms of inserting him in a starting role and getting some minutes. But DeMarco Dunn's going to need to play at a high level, and ideally one out of Seth Trimble, Jalen Washington, Dontrez, even Tyler Nickel, when they get their minutes, they can come in and be productive. So I think I don't know if it's something to worry about, but at the end of the day, Hubert's going to have a very thin bench in the second half, no matter what's happening going forward. So, when those one or two players do get their chances of just being productive.
Sherrell, when we haven't seen as much productivity from these guys, is it? Yeah, I'm going to ask you to speculate here, and I know we generally don't do that, but what do you think's happening with those guys? Is it just that the season's starting to get long for them? Is it the fact that the competition is becoming a little more stiff? Is the fact that the games are starting to have a little more gravitas? What do you think's going on with the freshmen right now?
Yeah, I think they probably are getting close to hitting a little bit of a wall. They are used to playing from usually the last weekend Thanksgiving to early middle February, something like that. But there's far fewer games. It's much less physical. But I think the whole rotation thing. I think Hubert Davis played subs out of necessity when he had to, and that's what we thought was a bench being developed. Whereas more so, he didn't have a choice. I mean, if you look at Notre Dame, Seth Trimble played a lot because Pete Nance was hurt, and the best option was to go with the kind of three guard lineup. Same thing against Wake Forest. Notre Dame, same situation. I think Nance played against Wake Forest. Excuse me. Notre Dame is when I think he got hurt. And missed that game. So they went to the three guard lineup against Virginia. Baycott gets injured in the first minute or so, and Nance isn't there. So you really don't have a choice but to play Washington and let him develop some. So I don't know if it's as much the bench was getting developed and is not playing anymore as they played when they were needed out of necessity, and now they're not needed as much. And again, we still don't really know exactly how Hubert Davis is going to play things moving forward. We think we know. We have a year and a half sample, but it could be a situation next year where he has more faith and more trust in guys, 8 through 13 off the bench. Whereas this year, it's pretty much 1 through 6.5, I would say, depending upon what game it is, which is the same as it was last year. That's my kind of read on the bench situation is that yeah, you can develop a bench in practice, but I feel like he plays a bench out of necessity, not out of trying to rest starters or trying to gain momentum for the second half. He plays them when he kind of has to, so far, is what I've seen.